Food webs and wildlife law enforcement. What are food webs? Food webs are a series of predator-prey and consumer relationships that are interlocked between interdependent food chains throughout an ecosystem, environment, or habitat. Colorado habitats. In the state of Colorado, there are 8 different habitats, which in turn means there are 8 main food webs throughout the state. These 8 main habitats are grasslands, riparian, semi-desert shrublands, pinyon-juniper woodlands, montane shrublands, montane forest, subalpine forest, and alpine tundras. Grassland food web. Throughout grasslands, there are many smaller food webs, but the main food web is pretty large. In the webs, there are the producers, such as grass, forbs, shrubs, and legumes. Primary consumers are the species that consume the producers. These species can be grasshoppers, black-tailed prairie dogs, pronghorns, and jackrabbits. Secondary consumers then prey on the primary consumers. For example, the coyote preys on a fawn pronghorn, jackrabbits, and prairie dogs, or a greater prairie chicken preying on a grasshopper. During the web's action, both secondary consumers and primary consumers eliminate. This creates nutrients for the producers. The nutrients promotes growth. The primary consumers and secondary consumers then graze and prey. Montane forest food web. The montane forest food web is one of the most known and studied food webs in Colorado and the United States. This is due to the abundance of big and small game. In montane forest, the main producers are trees, grass, and forbs. The primary consumers, like Abert squirrels, elk, deer, then forage and graze on the producers. As the primary consumers graze, secondary and tertiary consumers like bobcats, pine martens, and mountain lions prey on the primary consumers. Like grasslands, all consumers must eliminate and create nutrients for the producers. The alpine tundra food web. Located high in the Rocky Mountains is the alpine tundra. With a high variety of producers, there is a small variety of primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Alpine tundra primary consumers are pikas, yellow-belly marmots, mule deer, and elk. Secondary and tertiary consumers are eagles, hawks, foxes, coyotes, and sometimes even mountain lions. Wildlife law enforcement and food webs. Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act was created in 1973 to protect and conserve species that were quickly declining and becoming close to extinction. One success from the ESA was the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. The first wolf was released into Yellowstone in 1995. After their release, the Yellowstone food web started to change. Wolves are now pushing primary consumers like elk and deer out of meadows and back into the forest. Due to this, meadows weren't being overgrazed and producers started to grow and spread like wildfire. Years after the wolves were reintroduced, beavers and birds that were missing links from the web started to show up and fill in their spots. Ever since the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park, the food web has changed back to its historic state, and the park became more productive and teeming with historic life. Throughout the Endangered Species Act's history, there have been success stories. Another species that the ESA is conserving is the black-footed ferret. The black-footed ferret became endangered after their main prey, the black-tailed prairie dog, was being exterminated for agriculture and cattle raising. Due to the missing link in their food web, ferret populations dramatically decreased. With the black-footed ferret's habitat now being protected, their presence along with black-tailed prairie dogs have appeared back into their native grassland and prairie food webs. The Endangered Species Act in Colorado. The state of Colorado has set regulations with the U.S. government and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Endangered Species Act along with the black-footed ferret. Title 33-2-105, 105.5, and 105.6 are all examples of the endangered or threatened species regulations that have been put in place. Powers and duties. In the state of Colorado, wildlife officers get their judiciary powers and duties under the Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 33. Wildlife officers get their commission and judiciary powers from 33-6101, Powers and Duties of the Officers. Due to their commission, Colorado wildlife officers are able to serve and protect wildlife such as their food webs and everything in it from producers to the smallest consumers to the largest secondary and tertiary consumers. If there weren't wildlife officers or wildlife law enforcement, food webs would fall apart from too much hunting, trapping, fishing, and even poison intoxicants. Hunting. Even though hunting is taking primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers out of the food web, laws and regulations throughout Colorado and the U.S. keep webs in check. Regulations such as 33-6111 and 112 are laws that keep food web populations and competition in check. Poaching. Just like hunting, poaching regulations ensure the protection of all species and their food web. Poaching regulations protect primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers such as mule deer, elk, mountain lions, and moose. In the state of Colorado, poaching is a very big deal. Poaching regulations can be found in Title 33-6109 and 110. 109 fines can be between $1,000 and $35,000, while 110 fines can be $35 to $1,000. Feeding of wildlife. Feeding wildlife can have a drastic effect on food webs. When humans feed wildlife, it can severely hurt or cause death to the species. Due to the increase in deaths, food web competition increases. Some producers benefit from the increase in nutrients near the carcass, but secondary and tertiary consumers compete more for food and more can die from malnutrition. In the state of Colorado, feeding wildlife is illegal and violators can face a fine of $100. Poison intoxicants. Using poison intoxicants unlawfully and unreasonably can result in die-off throughout a whole food web. Some poison intoxicants can stay in the body and can be passed on. This can cause harm for the producers all the way to the top tertiary consumers. Anyone who is found guilty of poisoning, or using toxicants will be fined $200. They will also be assessed and could be given up to 20 license suspension points. This can be found in Title 33-6-130. Forensics. Hearing forensics, you would probably think of city police or the FBI, but wildlife law enforcement uses forensics throughout their whole case. Food webs can help wildlife law enforcement because the officers can see what kind of food is being consumed and where the most likely place the animals could be found. With this, officers can find the herd or plausible location the animal was in. The officer could also find another carcass or evidence for their open case. Downsides are the amount of different locations and ecosystems with the same producers. This could narrow the search or make the search area even bigger. And these are the sources citing.